All right, boys, friends, fellas, everybody listening, we are live. Mr. Mobbzy here and Zach Adraneia hosting your System 333's first podcast. Been a long time in the making. How long have we been trying to talk about this for, Ben?
9 months.
9 months, yeah. Well, actually, so just a bit of a background on us. How did we meet, Ben? I want you to give a bit of a lowdown where we first met and how we came to this point.
Okay, not a problem. So this would have been 2 years ago now, I think, two and a half years ago. And I was working for one of Sydney's biggest nightclub promoters. We don't have to mention his name, that's fine. But we were working at one of Sydney's biggest nightclubs, and Zach was a promoter there, and obviously through both working for the same promoter, we happened to, get along, and at that time, I probably wasn't on the same journey as I was the second time I met Zach. So, certain conversations weren't had in those initial meetings, but, at the same time, I was curious about where Zach's mindset was at, and, obviously about a year later, then it all kicked off, and that was when we really started having the conversations that have now led us to here.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much it. So we were working at a nightclub in Sydney. It was a really interesting time. So in that year, that was the year I actually did the Trans-Siberian. So I ended up stopping my work at the nightclub because I went to do that Trans-Siberian trip, and I never ended up returning. I was gone for a while. Then I went over to live in India and the US. And then I started working in a massive corporate firm, and that's where Ben and I ended up seeing each other again. I'd been working there for about 9 months, and I bumped into Ben, I think, on the 8th or 9th month I was there, I believe. And that's when we were kind of shocked to see each other, because it was just really random.
Yeah.
I know Ben was kind of following some of my posts on Facebook and the stuff I was writing about with System 333. So he had a curious mind, but we never really had any discussion surrounding these in-depth topics about the world and the state of humanity and where things are going. So I think really it was kind of something that just, Ben asked me, so what's the go with your book? What's the go with the System 333 thing? I see it, but I kind of understand it, but I want to know more about it. And that's when we led into these conversations. And then after Ben moved to Brisbane, so he moved not long after, I think 3 months after being in the company, he moved to Brisbane. He's been working here in Brisbane ever since. He's really enjoying his life in Brisbane. I think you do prefer it over Sydney, don't you?
Correct, 100%.
And that's something we're going to get into. So, since you've moved up here to Brisbane, what's the biggest thing you felt has been different? I mean, I travel a lot. We talk about living in a country. Yeah. And, a lot of people assume just because you live in one country, it's kind of can be the same. Yeah. But every city is different. I mean, I was in Melbourne a few months ago. Yeah. Had friends that live there, travelled there. I was in Adelaide about a year ago. I haven't been to Brisbane or Queensland I haven't been to Brisbane in 3 years. Yeah. I haven't been to, so Brisbane, Queensland, 3 years I haven't been here. What's the biggest difference you felt living in a place like Sydney, which is seen as the main centre of the money making and the hustle and bustle of Australia, to living now in Brisbane?
I think the biggest difference, bro, was, and this was a lot we were talking about last night, was like just people in general. Things are, what I found with Sydney is that everyone's in a rush to get places, and no one really cares about the person next to them on the train or the person walking past them in the street. Like, everyone's either stuck in their phone or, stuck in the getting to the next place. So no one's actually really present in the moment, because they're either looking at photos that have been taken in the past or focusing on where they need to go to next. So no one's actually just literally having to look up and say, hey, look at what's going on around me. And so that's what I figured about Brisbane, is that, now I don't have to catch the train anymore. Now I can drive to work, and so I'm driving to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. I get to watch the sunrise. I get to, have the window down. I get to really enjoy all these things that are going on. And I think obviously everyone else is in that mindset as well. So you just find that people are genuinely happier. You know, I'll go to fill up fuel in the morning, and yeah, it can be 6:30 in the morning, and the gas station attendant's just full of life. Hey, how you going? What can we do for you? You know, to the point where, like, for the first couple of weeks I was up here, I was kind of like, are you fucking talking to me, or are you like, is your friend behind me? Why are you asking me how I'm going? So I think the biggest difference is definitely the fact that people are more present in their day-to-day lives. They're a lot less stressed, obviously with less congestion of people. People feel they have a bit more freedom and a bit more space to do things, and you know, there's not as much traffic, so I think people just generally have more time to enjoy their lives as well, rather than once again focus on the next place to get to, and you know, not having their head in their phones because, well, they're on the road driving, they don't have to be stuck on a train.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really got to do, I think, with the part and parcel of living in a big city. When you live in a big city, everything is so rapid, and the reason it's gotten to the point it's been is because of that rapid movement of you know, the general population. Now, something really interesting, because I've mentioned we worked in a nightclub. You know, I remember having worked in the nightclub, I'd invite a whole lot of my friends, and one thing is they wouldn't be content with just being in that nightclub. They'd want to move to another one.
Correct.
They'd want to move to another one. There was no appreciation of being in one place. I mean, last night we went out. We only went to a simple bar. We didn't go anywhere too crazy. We had a great conversation. And we only had like a few drinks. And that was it. We had a great night. You know, and there was an appreciation for what was going on around. It was really simple. Yet, you know, Yet the fact was that we were still happy. But in Sydney, I feel like people can't even do that. I won't say people in general, but I feel like young people, young generation, they need to do so many different things to stimulate the environment they're in, just to make going out worthwhile. Why do you think that is for young people? I mean, when we talk young, we're talking, you know, young adults, 18 all the way up to, you know, even maybe early 30s, right?
Early 30s,
Why do you think this is, Ben? Observing maybe the difference between Brisbane and Sydney.
I think it's like, once again, because there's so many different options in Sydney. You know, you've got, you know, so many nightclub promoters pushing certain agendas, and you've got so many, not necessarily certain agendas, obviously they all want people at their clubs. And you've got, you know, maybe 10 nightclubs that probably really offer the same thing. They're going to be different in certain ways. But once again, because Sydney's so interconnected, and you've got, you know, one group of friends could go one place, another group of friends go, this is just what I've observed, is that what you've then got is people will go to a place and then they'll hear that a place is better based on someone else's opinion. They haven't even seen this place, they don't even know what's going on, but curiosity gets the better of them. You know, they could be having the best night of their lives, but what I think happens is that fear of missing out, you know. It's FOMO, yeah. So it's the old FOMO, and people, you know, hear about this other club that's going off. It's like, oh no, this is better. And so for fear of missing out of what could potentially happen there, rather than just stay at the club you're at and really enjoy that club
and soak it in,
you then end up leaving. Now, you and me last night, we're sitting there, we have no intention of going anywhere else. We didn't even look at our phones. The phones are down, we're present in that conversation, we're having a nice look around, people are enjoying themselves. You know, we're observing the fact that everyone else is just as present in that bar as us, which I think is really fascinating. You know, everyone in that place last night seemed to be present in their conversations and present in the music and in the atmosphere, and they were just content with being in that one place from what we could observe anyway. I think the biggest difference is like the fear of missing out, is that people in Brisbane once again seem to be a bit slower. And
I think that's the thing, because in Sydney people always feel like there's something to do to get by, there's something to do to move up, and because the city's moving so fast, if you're behind on the back foot, you're missing out already.
100%.
And I definitely felt that, you know, having come from living in India, where everything is ultra slow, you know, going back to Sydney, it was like, what the fuck's happening? 100%. Everything is moving so quick again. I remember I went to Greece for 3 weeks last year, and you know, even living in Greece, even just staying in Athens, life was still so much slower than Sydney, and Athens is a big city. So I mean, the interesting thing is, all this is happening within the one country we live in, which makes me believe, is it really the country that's an issue, or is it actually the city and the way the city is modified and created a somewhat overarching psyche for how the people think day to day? I mean, something as common as, for example, going to your store clerk. Like, I went in today to buy new JBL earphones. I had a good chat. The store clerk actually wanted to have a chat with me. You know, in Sydney, I won't say not all the time, but most of things are just really transactional and quick, right? What do you think? Do you think it really does then boil down to not the country itself, but the city that breeds the type of culture?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's the city that breeds the type of culture. And if you go up to a place like Darwin, which is even slower than Brisbane, same thing. People are willing to have a chat, and I've having lived up there at 17, and I'm sure the place hasn't changed all that much. Up there it was much the same. And Sydney's, New York's probably the same as Sydney. When you've got so many people in the same place at the same time, once again in a rush to get places, no one stops and is just present. Whereas what I've once again found now being in Brisbane is that people are more present. People want to have a conversation. People are just more curious about the person standing in front of them. Whereas in Sydney, it's just, once again, it's very transactional. Get what I need out of you and you need out of me, and let's just move on.
That's it, exactly.
One's because there's too much traffic to sit into, so people know that they're going to be wasting a lot of time there. People are going to be wasting time on trains, and so to them, I'm not saying they prioritise things right, but they prioritise things to the point where instead of prioritising conversations, they're prioritising time on social media.
And a lot of self-interest. Now,
Correct.
Here's something very interesting, right? So I find that whenever I leave Sydney, I almost get caught into that Sydney mindset.
Yep.
I think that very much one thing that I've learned from travelling or staying in a place for so long is you begin to adapt and become like the local people there, right?
100%.
And you're probably not even conscious of yourself doing it.
Correct.
Basically, the longer you stay in a city, the more you become like the people there, even if you've gone and lived in different places. So you begin to adapt, and that's just part of the social behaviour. So one thing I realised with time was having come back to Brisbane, I went and stayed in a hostel, and I used to love staying in hostels when I travelled because it gives you opportunities to meet new people, but also at the same time it's a way to be able to see different places, and being able to get the opportunity to go on tour guides and all that. So pretty much everything is at your reach there for the city if you want to know more about the city. Now, when I first turned up to the hostel, having come from Sydney, I just didn't want to have anything to do with anyone. Like, I don't want to speak to anyone. I just came there for my own business. I have my own friends there. I have my own thing to do. I have work to do, blah, blah, blah. Then I realised that my behaviour was pretty much making everything around me seem miserable because I wasn't being open to people. I just came and did my thing, that was it. Then I went and had a nap in the afternoon, and they were cranking this really loud music and I couldn't fucking sleep. And I was really irate, so I went out and told the people on the rooftop, because I was having a barbecue with blasting music, is there a way I can shut my window and lock it, because this music is having an effect on me trying to sleep. And I could see they seemed a bit disgruntled by the fact that I came out and said that, even though I had a right to, but it's just the mannerism in which I went out and about it. Anyway, they ended up shutting the window, that was cool. And then I went out again, went to buy some earphones, came back, and all of a sudden a storm started. And the storm started and everybody was on the rooftop. They went underneath the shelter. And that happened to be all outside where my fucking room was, okay? So all of a sudden, all these fucking people are just chilling outside my room, hiding from the storm. And I'm like, all right, fuck. Well, I've got all these people just sitting outside here. What the fuck am I going to do? Anyway, I put my shit down, came back out, decided just to randomly start a conversation with someone. I said, you know what, I'm just going to fucking have a conversation. That's it. Thank you.
Just when you arrive in the end, you start drinking.
Yeah, the mud. Yeah, that's cool.
Thank you.
Oh, we just got served some Lebanese coffee. Anyway, I started speaking to this guy that was standing at my door. Turns out, he's come from Sydney as well, and he's a comedian. He's got a show in Brisbane, and he lives in the same suburb as me, in Sydney. And then it turns out that he's also into personal development, and he's also going to be doing a podcast. And I told him a bit about myself, and I told him about what I do. And he goes, mate, I need to get you on my podcast. I'm so happy I met you. Fucking open yourself up to opportunities and be a human being and meet people. And I told him, mate, so look, I really only came here to do my thing, but I go, mate, one reason I love staying in hostels is meeting people like you. This is what I live for, you know. So we ended up having a mad conversation. He invited me to his comedy show. Says he's going to get me tickets when I go to Sydney, and we're going to have breakfast tomorrow morning. But mate, this guy was on my level, just understood everything I was saying. We had an endless conversation. And all I can say is that had I just come with that Sydney mentality, don't want a piece to deal with people, just doing my own thing, blah, 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 I would have never met this person. And I can definitely say that about so many cases in my life, traveling. Be open to opportunities. You don't know who you're going to meet. In speaking about this, Ben, have you felt like Brisbane has allowed you to be that type of person, to be more open to meet people and be open to opportunities rather than being in Sydney and the way people are?
Most definitely, and I think since I've been up here, it's, you know, I look for opportunities now, and I mean, look, if I'm being honest, when I came up here, I was, you know, I did have a very closed mindset. It's like I'm up here to, you know, turn my life around. I've got one mate up here, I don't need anybody else, and that's fine. And what I realised is that if I'd kept with that mindset, I would have closed myself off to a group of friends that I now currently have, who I've had, you know, really great times with, and, you know, formed really, really great relationships with. And if I just stayed in that closed mindset, I wouldn't have been able to experience what I have in the last 7 months. So I definitely see the point of view from the closed mindset, where obviously Sydney's a dog-eat-dog world. So essentially, you know, everyone by the time they get to about 24 has been fucked over by somebody.
Yep.
Could be the same person multiple times, or it could be, you know, different people on certain occasions. So having come from that background of being fucked over by almost everyone I've ever known, and look, partly due to my fault as well. I think that's one thing you learn as you go up.
The people you mix with.
Yeah, correct. But you also become more accountable for your part in things, and you stop being a victim and you look at, okay, look, maybe I could have prevented that, and it's probably my fault. And once you do that, it's quite empowering. So, that coffee's beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, actually, it really is nice. Yeah.
So, essentially, what I've found is that people in Brisbane are more open to those relationships as well. You can just talk to people in pubs and form really great relationships, or cafes, or while you're at work. And obviously being in sales up here has allowed me to network with people quite extensively, and, you know, just talking to people, you know, that are clients of mine that have invited me out to go fishing, or have invited me for drinks, or invited me over to their houses, you know. And 7 months ago I would have said no to that,
yeah,
because of the mindset I was in. It's like, nah, I've got my circle of friends, that's all, you know, I don't need anybody else. That's a very limiting mindset, and you're never going to grow, and you're never going to experience all that the world has to offer if you're content with, no, you know, I just have my circle of friends, that's all I need, and that's all I want. Well, you're never going to grow, because your circle of friends are probably just as stupid as you are, in all honesty.
Yeah. That's where the term circle jerking comes in.
They're probably not going to teach you anything. And look, that's a pretty harsh way to look at it, but that's just what I've found, you know. And if you want to grow, and if you want to level up, you have to find people to level up with. Now, I'm 24 years old. The youngest person that I spend time with up here on a consistent basis is 32. So my circle of friends since I've come up here has increased in age dramatically, which has forced me to keep up with that level.
Yep.
And that older generation. And to be honest, I don't think enough people these days spend time with enough time with older people.
Yeah.
Because you learn so much from them and their experiences, and they've gone through just as what we have. You know, you'd be stupid to sit there and think no one's gone through what I've gone through. Well, that's just a crock of shit.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why having that perspective.
That's a very egotistical and narcissistic way to look at life.
It is, and that's why having that perspective and knowing that there are many other people that are going through their own shit, not same shit. You need to start making reason to know who you're speaking with, why you're speaking with them, and then just also building that bridge with people because they can open so many doors for you. And when I spoke to the guy that was a comedian that I said that I met out in my rooftop hostel, he told me that he just started saying yes to everything. He started just opening himself up to opportunities.
Yep.
And he goes, everything has grown so much since then. One thing I teach about in System 333, Ben, is part of System 333 is the human experience, right? And the human experience has a lot to do with the openness to experience, which is essentially part of one of the big 5 personality traits that Jordan Peterson actually talked about quite a bit. But the openness to experience really has a lot to do with being able to put yourself out there in uncomfortable situations, but also willing to read different things, willing to learn from different people.
I think it's
willing to take risks.
Comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I love traveling was because it put my openness to experience really high, trying different type of stuff. One thing that I feel has probably really stunted the growth of openness to experience in Sydney is because Sydney very much kind of works on a social climber type of mentality, which means you can't mingle with anyone. You need to mingle with people for a value transaction reason. Right. Everybody's trying to climb a hierarchical ladder, whether it's with their own organisation or another organisation. And the main reason is to get by.
Correct.
So they can be seen as someone.
Correct.
Do you think that's probably one of the biggest differences Sydney as a city has in comparison to Brisbane or maybe other places you've lived in and been, Ben?
So I'm qualified, probably overqualified to speak on this based on the fact that I worked security for 5 years.
Yeah, and that probably gives you quite a lot of human experience to be able to state things that you've seen. So give us a few examples or stories.
I'll give you an example just from my own perspective. So I worked at one of Sydney's biggest nightclubs out in Western Sydney, out in Rouse Hill.
Yeah.
Was it the main? Sorry, it's not the main fiddler anymore. It's just a fiddler. And I was there for about a year and a half, and it was just really interesting people's perception of me and who I was, and also my perceptions of others. And one thing I kind of gathered there is that I'd been there for about 6 months, and I built up a good reputation there through not being a dick. What I figured out was just be nice, be tough, but be fair and
firm.
Yeah, fair and firm. But if at some point if someone wanted to fucking have a go, then I wasn't going to back down, and that was going to be that. One minute I could have been the nicest guy in the world, next minute I could be throwing you into a wall.
Yep.
But what I found was the amount of people that came up and pretended to be my friend.
Yeah.
Now, I remember being asked by one of the bartenders there. He's a young guy, he's about 19, and he's got Asperger's, or autism or Asperger's, one of the two, so he's a bit socially awkward, and so he sees someone like me cruising around, and look, I was probably arrogant for the most part. I was taking advantage of the situation I was in, and, he's asking me, Ben, like, how do I get people like me like they like you? And I kind of looked at him a bit confused. I said, what do you mean? People don't like me, mate. I said, people are only nice to me because they want something from me. I said, people are only nice to me because they think if they are nice to me that I won't kick them out when they're too drunk. Yep. Or if I won't catch them for taking drugs. Mm-hmm. Or, I'll help them out if someone tries to fight them. I said, if I came here plain clothes, 99% of these people would not come up and say hello to me. I said, they all have an agenda with me and I have an agenda with them.
Exactly.
And, he's kind of like, well, what's your agenda with them? I said, well, it feeds my ego. And being able to accept that fact that, I was still getting something out of them. I was exacting my pound of flesh. But you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna let you feed my ego and stroke it for a bit. I'm gonna let you pretend that. Sorry, I'm gonna play this little pretend game of the fact that you like me and I like you. Really, I think you're a fucking idiot. And you probably think I'm a fucking idiot, but we both want something from each other, and therefore we're going to play this game. It was the same with females. Half those females probably wouldn't have been interested in me. Actually, 3/4. of those females probably wouldn't have
if you didn't have that security status.
Exactly right. And I can admit that. Now, look, at the end of the day, they were coming to me. Now, I know for a fact, look, I probably could have made those women interested in me, but it would have taken far more effort and far more bravado and intelligence.
Yeah, game or whatever they like to call it. Yeah,
that's it, bro. And you know, then it would have. So that was one thing I seen was people in this social climbing status were very fake. Now, another example is a guy that I know, and I won't mention his name. Yep. He's a good guy, don't get me wrong. But he's got X amount of followers on social media, and I do feel bad based on the fact that, you know, people do only come up to him because they either want to get some of his limelight or, you know, because he's seen as this popular guy, when really in actual fact, like, it's all bullshit. Like, no one actually gives a fuck about him or who he is, and he's not the only one. There's been another guy, and I could definitely look him up, but, you know, I seen this guy walk in. He's got like 25,000 followers on Instagram, and I had no idea who he is because I actually don't give a fuck. And I seen him come in, and he's kind of coming up to me, kissing my ass, like expecting me to know who he is. And it's just like, who the fuck are you, mate? You know, he was the most socially awkward bloke I've ever met in my life, and lived his life through social media and through social climbing. And I just thought it was incredibly sad because he actually didn't know how to interact with people. He had no people skills whatsoever, but he's a quote-unquote social media influencer, guru. Yeah. And I just think, you know, that is how fake the world's become, is that you can pretend to be something through social media, and then in real life you're the complete opposite to that.
You're the complete potato.
And people are trying to be friends with these social influencers because it'll give them some status, when really none of that matters, because those people don't even know who the fuck they are in the first place.
Absolutely. And you know, here's the one thing, I mean, I used Instagram quite, you know, later on in its lifetime, and I used it to put up stuff of my travels and stuff, right? But really, one thing I mainly used it for was to get some traction on my book, and you know, I like bodybuilding, so training is a big thing. I think training, you know, bodybuilding really changed my life in a positive way, Ben. I think fitness in general is good, but also traveling and just my hobbies and stuff. But one thing is, I've found now, as I met more and more people using social media, a lot of it has just become a misconstrued self-image. And for example, I remember when I was, you know, really in the dating game for a while, Ben, I would meet women and I'd see their, Instagram profiles, and they would be some type of super celebrity, or, you know, in their eyes, God knows how many followers and all that. But, you know, when I met them, they were just, you know, regular people, regular human beings. But yet, so much of their concept of self and energy has been diverted into literally what is within a phone and on the net. That they have literally roboticized their existence in reality. 100%. And this is where I think the biggest fear is, that the AI is slowly taking over.
Correct.
That there is this transference between human individuality in the present into an AI-based type of culture.
Correct.
And that is, I think, one of the things that is going to be one of the downfalls of society. So when you look at big cities, very much a lot of it's based upon that fast tech building AI type of stuff. When you look at small country towns, well, that hasn't really hit home as much for them because of, you know, it's slow, sleepy type of city. So is that something you've also noticed? I mean, maybe Brisbane's still quite a big city, but even moving from Sydney to Brisbane, Sydney was so much, the Instagram traction was so much higher in a city like Sydney.
Yes. So I think up here, one, because I'm not in the club scene anymore up here, and that was a choice that I wanted to make myself, you know. I mean, I've spent every weekend for the last 5 years in that scene, and don't get me wrong, it was fun and I had a really great time. But once again, people's perception of, you know, just to give a quick example, look, I saw the same people go to the same places every single weekend for God knows how long. For what reason, I'm still not sure. I don't even think they're sure. But I definitely think, you know, the relationships are becoming more online than they are in person. You know, like you see people have, like I saw it all the time. People on dates not talking.
I can't believe that. See, whenever I've gone on dates, you know,
So
the lady has her phone away, I have my phone away.
100%. This is the biggest thing, right? This is what's
I
wrong.
can't conceptualize. I remember I was sitting in a dessert bar in Parramatta, and I was with my mate, and we'd seen all these couples go in. They're young. They might have been in their 20s, early 20s. Mate, none of them were even talking with each other. They were just taking photos of their ice creams and all that.
And this is
this is the transference to the AI.
Correct.
Fuck the ice cream.
Yeah.
I just want a photo of this shit.
Correct. So they're not actually worried about the thing itself. They're worried about the perception that it's going to give other people of what they're actually doing. So that was a big thing, is that, you know, I'm walking around a pub and I'm seeing a few people on dates and they're just sitting there not saying anything or sitting on their phones, and I'm just thinking, like, what the fuck, what's the actual point? Like, why are you out with each other then? You know, to the point where one person who I was working with was on a date with a girl, and I saw him on his phone. I walked over and smacked him across the back there. I'm fucking talk to you, dickhead. Like, what's wrong with you?
Do you think people have actually run out of things to speak about? One, because...
No, I think... Actually, go on, because I'll answer it.
Okay. I feel like people might have run out of things to talk about simply because their whole life has been based on a phone. There's no self-development, self-introspection. How can you talk about anything about yourself if everything is happening in a virtual reality?
Correct.
You know, you're there's a transference of that.
Well, look,
there's no I mean, whereas if you go to country town, people are happy to talk about themselves.
Well, look, I think people are scared. Not scared, but people don't know themselves well enough to want to get to know other people, right? So, you know, people like you and me ask ourselves questions like, so what do we actually enjoy doing? And we'll ask ourselves 1,000 different questions every day. Like, do we really enjoy this? Do we really enjoy that? So when I look at getting to know someone, I ask them questions that no one else will ask them, that I know no one else asks them, because those are the questions that I would like. So essentially, and sorry, because I almost went down a tangent there, so this is the best way I can describe it. When you're getting to know someone, you have to think, what questions would I ask myself to get to know me?
Yeah.
You know? So it's kind of like, what's my favourite movie, or what did I want to be when I was a kid? What would I say about myself that would give someone the most overall perception of me that's both truthful, genuine, without really caring whether they're going to like me or not? It's being able to be transparent with them. So then you look at yourself and say, okay, what questions would I ask myself that are going to bring out these answers?
Yep.
You then formulate them and you go, okay, it's cool. So this is what I'm going to ask this person.
Yeah.
And I did it. So I'll give you guys a little experiment that I conducted.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure the girls knew I was doing this, but I've shared this story a couple of times, but most people think this is pretty weird. I don't. It's what I like to do.
Yeah.
I like to get to know people. So for the year and a half that I was working at the Fiddler, but the perception of me that I was sleeping around a lot, which is funny because I only slept with one girl who is now my ex-girlfriend. Great girl, have nothing against her. It's just, you know, I was still a bit wild, so I couldn't really settle down. But one girl in a year and a half. Now we calculated it. I think I got about 50 or 60 numbers of girls.
Yeah.
Right. That only converted into sleeping on. So it's, in sales, that's a really shit conversion rate, but I wasn't worried about that.
But I think the real question is, did you care about converting them? I mean, if you're a person that actually had, if you're a person who actually wanted to pursue and sleep with all these women and cared about it, it's a different story. You put more effort in.
But I didn't.
Yeah, you didn't. But yeah, go on.
And what I found really interesting, right, is that I'd offer these girls to, you know, just go to a dinner, and you know, I didn't set any expectation. I didn't go into that dinner thinking I want to sleep with this guy. I go, you know what, I actually just want to get to know them.
Yeah.
And it was really sad because I've taken a lot of these girls out, and all of them were great girls. You know, they were fantastic young women that, you know, in a different lifetime I probably could have pursued them a bit more, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And the way I describe it is, one, sometimes it's just nice to take a pretty girl out to dinner, you know?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's just
have a
nice
good conversation.
and have a good conversation. Now, a lot of these girls that I took out were kind of taken aback by the line of questioning that I gave them because they weren't used to it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So I would ask them, you know.
Yeah, with that, could you have some more water?
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic, thank you.
Did you like the dessert?
What desserts have you got?
We have a menu.
Yeah, I'll
thank
take
you.
a look, thanks.
So, I think the biggest thing was they were kind of taken aback by the question, you know, because I'd ask them like, oh, so what did you want to be when you were a kid? It's not something people really think about. And then I'll ask them questions like, okay, well, if money wasn't a problem, what would you do with your life? Like, what do you enjoy most? What's your passion? And they're kind of sitting there thinking like, oh wow, okay, like this is really confronting because I don't think I've ever actually thought about this before.
I know I've heard a similar story from one of my mates who also went on a date with a chick and asked similar questions. But go on.
Yeah. So I'm asking these questions and they're kind of sitting there a bit awkward now, you know, thinking like, oh fuck, Ben, why'd you have to ask us this? And it's like, well, because I'm genuinely interested in the answer. And what I think is really lacking today is that people's genuine genuine curiosity to want to get to know people. Now look, I'm really guilty of it in the sense that I'll be the first one, and I've only started to correct this recently. I'll be the first one to talk about myself for the simplistic reason of I feel like people are going to judge me, so I need to get out on the front foot and justify myself before they do so.
I was like that for a while too, yeah.
Correct. But so people aren't, and this is the thing, people just aren't self-aware enough
To be able to handle those questions.
Correct.
And to be able to even hear someone who is self-aware speaking.
Correct.
I had the same problem for a while, but I've noticed, one thing I've noticed is, so this comes back all down to when we talk about Sydney, right? I've noticed this very much in big cities. Because see, you know, I've dated, Gibbo just wrote to me, my mate just wrote to me, I've just experienced American Psycho bitches. That's funny. So that might be a story of its own.
Yeah.
Okay, so what pretty much, by the way, you know, the other half of System 333, Gibbo, he's in the US, traveling middle America right now. Oh, all right, you want to go with the mixed Lebanese sweets? What else have we got?
Up to you, man. I'm happy with anything.
So you're really keen for a dessert? Because I love Turkish Delight.
Oh, it's up to
But
you.
do you like Turkish Delight?
Yeah, I'm down for
Oh, but this comes with it anyway. No, we'll go with this. We'll go with the mixed Lebanese sweets. That's cool. All right, so back to what I was saying. And I know we got carried over in a bit of a fucking rabbit hole here.
Yeah.
But essentially what I realized was when I was traveling and dating, I found that cultures where life was slower, you know, the people actually knew more about themselves. So the women I was seeing were comfortable with me asking certain questions. And I was comfortable with, you know, talking about myself more. And what I came to realize was it does come down to the city conditioning, where everything needs to be boiled down and people are unsure of what to say and stuff because there is no time for introspection, individuation, or anything you call it. And some of the best relationships I've had with women have been on the basis of me really getting to know them and them knowing themselves.
100%.
And that's the thing. So when you talk, just because I really look at the data. Interestingly enough, you said, you know, you maybe went to dinner with 50 different women. How many of them were Australian?
Actually, look, I definitely take 50 women to dinner. If I'm being honest, I probably took about 10 to 15.
Okay, 10 to 15. All right, that's still a decent size pool for what we're talking about. So, were they all Australian born?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay, so that's interesting. So were they all from Sydney then?
Yep.
Okay, so and that's not saying that, you know, all people from Sydney are like that, but I'm thinking, you know, you're still looking at a set of group of people in a certain district and demographic that have displayed a certain part of behaviour. Then this links back to our topic where it's really the same with maybe any other big city in this regard, where, you know, there is no time to really introspect. And part of what I write about in my book is having come from Sydney, gone to live alone and travel, especially when I was living in India. That's when I'm like, holy shit, I never really got much time to really get to know myself.
Exactly.
And most of the time I was spending where I could have gotten to know myself was on Counter-Strike, escaping that.
So, essentially, what people are always looking for an escape these days, right? And I think this is the biggest thing about Sydney is that, and I mean, look, I'm happy to talk about this now. There's a few people that know about it, but so I was a heavy drug user.
By the way, I'm probably not so keen on dessert. I want my stomach to settle down a bit.
Sweet, that's fine. Yep, looks like there's no dessert. The verdict's done on that one. Actually, I might get some baklava.
I wonder if they just have the piece separate. Maybe they do. Well, just ask.
Yeah, I'll ask her.
Yeah, go on.
So essentially, and that was my escapism. So I was using everything from MDMA, cocaine to speed, methamphetamines, and for not for the reason that people think as well. I mean, obviously, like I said, there was definitely escapism, but when people think of a drug addict or a functioning drug addict, someone that's a heavy drug user, they think of like someone in a box. Or like a homeless person or someone that twitches.
Yeah, someone who basically is.
Correct. Now, Zach. Now it's funny because Zach was working with me for 3 months, and I was rocking up in a suit every day. So. And
I didn't even know. I didn't even know. Hey man, I won Joke of the Year. Come on. Yeah, that's a big deal.
So Zach can vouch for the fact that I was definitely not your average-looking, highly functioning drug addict. Which, look, is definitely nothing to be proud of, but once again, it comes down to a matter of perception. So, my reason for taking it was based on the fact that when I fell into the same trap as everyone else did of watching. So, do you guys just have baklava by itself?
Sorry?
Baklava by itself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just baklava?
Yes, please.
2 pieces?
No, you just want one. How much is one Turkish delight? One.
One Turkish delight. I'm not sure.
Yeah, find out and let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I fell into the trap of sitting there on Instagram and Facebook for hours.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why the fuck what am I even looking at? Like, I've scrolled through the same thing 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I came up to Brisbane that I figured it out. You're looking for something to take, you're looking for something to take your mind off dealing with your reality.
Yeah.
So you're sticking your head into everybody else's reality and cat videos and fucking all sorts of Justin Bieber pics and all
And
sorts of
I'm guilty of it too.
Oh, 100%.
I'm guilty of it, but I feel like it's...
It's 250.
That's fine. Yeah.
250.
Yeah, that's fine.
Fantastic.
That's fine.
We just get
So
one of each.
one piece baklava, one piece Turkish delight?
That's cool. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I'm guilty of it myself.
And one thing... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I'm guilty of it myself, but I find that it's almost automatic. So, for example, when you're looking at people's Instagram stories, you're not even conscious of it.
Correct.
And that's becoming an automated behaviour, right?
Correct.
And I've started catching myself out more.
Yep.
Look at this bullshit I'm watching.
So what I did for a whole week was turned off Instagram and turned on Facebook. And what you don't realise is that social media is, and if you actually take the chance or take the time to try and get off it, you realise it's a compulsion and it's an addiction. Based on the fact that even if you're off it for a day or 2 days, you feel like you're missing out on something, you're missing out on the world, or what if I miss this, or whatever. Who cares? Like, who actually cares? Be present in your own life. And I think this is what a lot of guys in our generation, or a lot of people in our generation are struggling with, is actually being present in their reality and accepting the fact that, you know what, you don't need to know what everyone else is doing. It doesn't matter. It has no effect on your life whatsoever, knowing something or not knowing it in regards to other people's lives. And if you just look within yourself, you're going to find so much happiness.
You're going to find so much treasure.
Yeah, exactly. But what people are doing now is comparing their lives with other people's
without
lives.
worrying about maximising their own human experience.
Exactly.
And just give me a chance to read an excerpt at the beginning of chapter 22 in my book, System 333 Beginnings. This is the chapter 22, To Live and Die in Kashmir. So I'm going to read it from just the first paragraph. A few days after returning from Ladakh, my phone stopped working along with the guest house internet, leaving us with no contact with the outside world. I was now responsible for maximising my own human experience in this place, so I walked through the village streets every day to see the possibilities that could eventuate. Most people knew my father, and the word had spread among the community that there was a new half-caste Kashmiri in town. So basically why I read that out is that it got to a point where I had no access to internet or social media or anything, and I was living in this barren, well not barren, but this really slow Kashmiri village where people are completely conditioned, totally different. So, but I took responsibility for my own life, not complaining about the fact that I didn't have the social media or whatever, and went out and met new people. And people knew who I was because of my dad, and that just opened up all these opportunities, which comes back to what I was saying before. When life is slower, when you're not living in a big hustle and bustle city, you're going to be more open to opportunities and meeting people. And in that chapter, you will read about a whole bunch of interesting people I meet that are Kashmiris that you would not meet if you're too busy on social media. And that's why I even had a video. Don't rob yourself of your own human experience.
Correct. Yep.
By following others or too busy being saturated in other people's human experience.
100%. You know, I definitely couldn't agree more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Mate, beautiful.
So, and that's what it comes down to. And this is where I said, if people just got off social media for about a week and had a look at their lives, one, they'd be terrified of how much they've actually been avoiding. Now, I'll be honest. At the moment, I use social media as an ego thing because I'm kind of wanting to throw it back in people's faces in Sydney that said I would be nothing, and you know, told me I would never amount to anything. Throwing it back in their faces, saying, "Oh, look how good my life is." So I'm guilty of it. I'm not saying I'm not. I'm a prime example of what a lot of people do on social media. You know, something to feed their ego. But the difference between me and all those other people is I can actually admit that I'm doing that. So, you know, I'll put up that, you know, I'm up at 4:30 in the morning, which I am most mornings. And one of the biggest reasons I do it is because I know no one else is up at that time. So I'm getting a jump on them, you know. But once again, if I really looked at that, why do I need people to know what I'm doing if I didn't really care? So essentially, I'm still on that path to self-discovery. Well, there's a reason I still care for something. Well, I don't know that just yet. It's something I have to figure out. But whilst I'm still promoting it, and I could sit here and say, oh, look, I'm promoting it to try and motivate people, and that would be lying to myself and lying to everyone listening, you know, and lying to you. Whereas this is a big part of self-awareness and growing as a person, is actually looking yourself in the mirror and going, you know what, this is actually why I do this. Not the reason I'm telling everyone why I do it. This is actually why.
And that's really a big thing because smoke and mirrors. So for example, me, I wouldn't.
By the way, shout out to everyone who does still watch me. You know, if you're pissed off, good.
For me, it's very interesting. See, I didn't want to use social media when I came back from my first trip.
God, that was good.
Oh yeah, it was good dessert. But when I realized and told myself I'm going to be writing a book and I'm going to be releasing all these videos of insider knowledge, I kind of needed a platform to work with.
Correct.
So social media wasn't any longer to flaunt my travels or to kind of, you know, write about shit and show off or whatnot. It was more so a medium or channel for me to deliver information to make individuals more aware. That's pretty much my goal. That's why I wrote my book.
Correct.
And the reason I didn't really shove it too much in people's faces, like, was because, I mean, I only did my first print run of 100, did a seminar, all that type of stuff. But I didn't write this book to make myself necessarily a business or popular person by saying I'm an author. I wrote this book because there are things that I've learned from my human experience that I believe will help others. It was more to be of service to the world. And that's something I remember having a great discussion with this lady I work with, that pretty much it's your intention of doing things.
Correct.
I mean, if it was up to me, I wouldn't use my Facebook anymore. I wouldn't use Instagram, but because I got something out there that's of value to people.
Correct. I'm using social mediums to connect, convey that message.
And for example, I mean, we've stayed in touch, Ben, through the means of Facebook. We probably wouldn't have done this without that. You wouldn't have known about all this without that.
Correct.
So this is an example, a byproduct of that.
Correct.
But really, I mean, then I would ask myself how many people are actually using it for the same reason I'm using it. And that's the thing. And even if I'm using it for the right reason or not really a thing, but just know why you're using what you're doing. And with that being said, I think one of the biggest reasons, coming back, big city mentality, Sydney, people use social media for being able to climb the hierarchy, that social hierarchy, that social ladder.
It's how many likes they're getting, and they're basing their self-worth off of how many people liked my post, how many people, you know, commented, you know, and look, I'm guilty of it as well. You know, I'll post a story up and within 6 hours. I'll check it once an hour to see who's watching it. But I'll just sit there and I think, why? What for?
Do you reckon there's an intrinsically within the human being an almost biological factor why humans do that? Like innately within our biology and the way we're constructed, we still seek social approval to know that we have value in this world?
Correct. So, look, the simple answer to it all is we're fucking idiots. Humans are fucking stupid. Like, we can be really beautiful, but at the same time, like, we're not great. I guess the better answer to all that is... You're a piece of shit. The better answer to it at the end of the day is everyone's kind of looking for that sense of approval, whether it be their parents, whether it be their social circle of friends, teachers, whatever it might be, bosses, is people will generally put things out on social media to test the waters to see like, is this okay? Like, is what I'm doing okay? Is it socially acceptable to do what I'm doing? And so whether that's through a status or through a post, I know of people that will not get a certain amount of likes on photos and take them down, and that's a real issue. That's a pretty big problem. Whereas I have conversations with my best mate's partner, who's 38, has travelled extensively, an absolutely incredible human being, and her Instagram is for her. It's for nobody else but her. She has absolutely no need or want for anyone to care about what she's doing. It's for her to create her memories and give herself a kind of look in the rearview mirror of where her life's been. Through capturing certain images and points in time. So I really admire her for being able to take that stance. Whereas all our generation, whether from 18 to 30, for the most part, I'm not saying this is everyone, but the general public are going to do it to either impress people or to put out an image of themselves. So no one's going to put up on Facebook or Instagram, had a really fucking shit day on my husband cheated on me, or my girlfriend cheated on me, or actually being honest with what they're going through. Like, hey guys, I'm actually feeling really insecure about certain relationships in my life right now, and I'm really struggling with that. No one's going to put those fucking things up. Everyone's going to put up the fact that they're out to dinner with those certain friends, having a great fucking time.
Isn't that crazy? Like, for example, we've gone out to dinner tonight, brilliant restaurant, went out last night.
Yep.
I didn't post anything. No. I do want to put that photo of us up by the bridge. That was a good photo.
Yep.
That really will complement this podcast, actually. But, mate, I haven't posted up anything, and I've stopped doing that. I've actually even stopped talking to people where I travel and stuff, unless there's something of value.
Correct.
The main reason is because, see, in my earlier days, I was putting all my travel photos up and stuff, and I thought, actually, a lot of people have told me this, but because some of them can't travel themselves, they like to live through my travels too.
Correct.
Which I think could be a positive thing.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
Yeah, and I mean, that could be a positive thing because, how many people do the Trans-Siberian in Russia?
Correct.
I think showing that and being someone that you directly know that has done that and sharing it, can be a wonderful thing,
Correct.
People come and ask me, and then some people I know would want to do a similar trip to Russia. My neighbours, for example, they went to Russia themselves. I gave them all the advice they needed, and they were grateful for that. So I think there is some positivity of sharing travel stuff. But one thing I noticed is with time I just became, I wanted, because of that, exactly what you said, became more self-aware of myself, and I realised maybe I'm posting my travel stuff for some good reason, people interested, but not everybody's going to see it like that, right? And also, one thing I learned is just because I'm traveling and going to all these great places, it doesn't actually mean I'm always internally happy. I'm always going through my own struggle. And the inner self and the conflict is not something that's ever discussed. I won't say ever discussed. I think there are people that are discussing it more so now than others. But the main reason is because the outlet of being able to discuss your internal conflict comes with the bearing of too much judgment from others, right?
Correct.
That, for example, someone rich and famous, if they're going through depression or anxiety or anything like that, well, people go, it's fucking stupid that they're rich and famous, how can they be going through all this? You know what I mean?
So look, everything's relative, right? So this is what I figured out up here. So since coming to Brisbane, the circle of friends that I've been introduced to are multi-millionaires and people that own, worldwide brands. By the way, shout out to Celebrity Inc. Trying to go on, who just happens to be a good friend of mine, and you know, I spoke to him really recently about this, and you know, he could never work another day in his life. You know, he's made millions of dollars, you know, in a very short period of time, and you wouldn't know it. He doesn't carry on like a, you know, like a pretentious prick. But even he said to me, everything is relative. So the higher you climb that ladder in the financial world anyway, you know, in that financial social status, you know, you generally just want more, and you still have problems, and people think like, oh well, you know, and this is where it kind of comes back to money won't make you happy. You know, well, it's, yeah, that's a hard one that we won't answer now, but at the same time, he said everything is relative. So when you've got the money, you will find a way to spend it. But your problems also become bigger as well, because in order to get the money that you've got, you've had to bring a certain level of value to the world and the marketplace. Now, he's got the most successful tattoo chain in the world. Now, that's going to come with its problems. You know, he's looking after 19, 20 stores worldwide. You know, he's dealing with problems that someone that just works a 9 to 5 would not be dealing with. So when people say, oh, well, he's got money, he should be happy, and why is he depressed? Because he's looking after, you know, thousands of staff.
There's more, I think with the more you earn also, there becomes more responsibility for others around you. That's pretty much what you get.
So now he's not just thinking, he now not only has to think about himself and make decisions for himself and his family, he's now thinking of 1,000 staff members and 1,000 staff members' families, and how his decisions affect all those people as well. Now, if you don't think that's going to bring some added level of stress and anxiety, you're a fucking idiot. Of course it's going to bring that, because now you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, looking after all your staff members. Now he is that type of person that does those things. Some bosses don't care. But for people to look at the wealthy and the successful and say, oh, well, you know, they've got all this money, they shouldn't be depressed. Well, at the same time,
you don't know what their hustle's
correct.
like.
But that person could then turn around and say to you, well, it's like, well, mate, you just get to go to a 9 to 5. Why are you depressed? You just got to turn up and do fuck all and then go home. I'm working from 5 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, and then I can still get a phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning to have to go and fix a problem at work. So everything's relative. Everything's within
because the human experience is all different. At
the same time, the people that don't have that money, of course they're going to pick apart the person that does and find ways to criticise them, because they themselves don't have the courage or the gumption to go out and take those risks that the person that has all those things has done.
I mean, exactly. If you want to really boil it down to what the social construct then becomes, I mean, we're really looking at that tall poppy syndrome.
Correct. Yep. Australia is one of the only places that I've seen it happen. In every other country, success is celebrated.
Yeah, in Sydney especially. So, tall poppy syndrome exists. I think a lot of people think I'm fucked up for writing a book and the shit I talk about. Yep. I think a lot of people think I'm weird. It's always been like that, and I don't give a fuck. I actually don't give a fuck. You know why? Because that's just how I am. Yeah, I'm different. I think we all are different in our own ways, but people are very afraid to own it. They're very afraid of the opinion of others, right?
Correct.
You know, I've been criticised.
Because they're not confident enough in themselves, though, to handle those opinions.
And that's one thing. I think the more aware you become as well of yourself and your own ideas, the more indifferent you become to criticism. Right. I think criticism is only helpful when you realise that there's something that needs to be fixed, if it's not benefiting you. So, for example, if you would call it constructive criticism, but basically, if when people read my book, maybe there were certain parts of the book, like my colloquial language, that would work with maybe Aussies, but maybe not so necessarily be understood by people whose first language isn't English.
Correct.
So I mean, and that's a valid criticism, because maybe I'd have to make it more grammatically simple, and I know that being an English teacher, right?
Yeah.
But when we talk about criticism as in just criticising for the sake of bringing someone down, correct, and people taking cheap shots,
yeah,
well, I really look at that
self-esteem. Compliments.
I look at that really look at the self-esteem of those people, and think, man, you must really be a self-loathing piece of shit to say these type of things, because there's really no reason to. We're just, at the end of the day, some people are just living their lives, doing their thing, doing the thing they're doing best.
Yeah, for people to go out there Okay, and this is one of the great things that Instagram actually has brought to the world. Is there is a bunch of quotes out there that have been pulled together from a bunch of different people in life that can really, if you look for it, you can find a lot of motivation in these kinds of things. And it's like someone that's doing better than you will not criticise you, right? It's only the people doing worse than you, or So I mean, look, I look at my father, for example. So my father's quite a successful salesperson. Who would have thought? And so is my uncle. So it runs in the family, I guess. But they've been in an industry for 40 odd years, right? So you'd expect them to be successful if they're half decent at their jobs. Yeah, my father cops all sorts of criticism and backstabbing and comments being made at parties, whatever else. And it's because and these comments are all coming from people that are on less money than him, that generate less revenue for their businesses than he does, that have more depressing lives based on what he's told me. So someone that's doing better than you will never criticise you.
Yeah.
It will always be people, and Jordan Peterson talks about this in the social hierarchy, like everyone's somewhere in the hierarchy, in a social status. And the further you get up there, clearly the more enemies you create based on the fact that there's more people below you, and the general consensus is going to be that you've done something unethical to get to where you are, and people will rationalise success any way that they can because they just don't want to work hard, or they don't want to try and figure it out themselves. This is where everyone says, like, what's the secret to success? There isn't a secret. It was absolutely fantastic. So beautiful. Oh, yeah, of course.
Would you like anything else?
Oh, no, we're fine for that.
Would you have the bill?
The bill just at the front.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, so at the end of the day, if people would say, what's the secret to success? There is no secret. Mm-hmm. If people honestly still think there's a secret to success, they're fucking stupid and they haven't actually looked at the world. Success is simply, one, not giving up, just in my opinion anyway, and this is what, hanging around successful people and studying them, this is what I've come to know, is, and I won't go into all of it, I'll just go into the simplistic version of it, is that one, they just worked harder than everybody else. They came up with an idea that they thought would bring value to the world in some way, shape or form, which they have. And three, just never giving up. So once again, people say that, oh, there's a secret to success and I couldn't possibly do that. Based on the fact they just can't rationalise it. And so when they see someone else doing something that they can't do, they instantly want to bring them back to their level to make themselves feel more comfortable about the fact that they're scared, insecure individuals, and they have no ability to take risk.
Absolutely, and I think that really is kind
of, once again, sounds really harsh on people, but this is just a fact. People can think I'm a dick for thinking this.
No, you're not. I think you're a realist, and that's the thing. And this really wraps up what the message is in the podcast. Where when you having moved from a fast life in Sydney to a slow life, and then taking it all in and looking at what constitutes human behaviour. I mean, at the end of the day, humans do want to have success, but a lot of humans don't want to work hard for it. And then when you look at the living within the means of somewhere like CBD, where everybody's kind of like Sydney's like a social climbing type of city.
Yeah.
Part of that social climbing is also the crab in the bucket dragging each other down, bringing each other down from the success, hence why it is so fucking miserable there. Because even if you do succeed, you just get thrown under the bus.
One thing I will say about this is people think that, the reason I believe that happens, and I figured this out recently, is that people think that there's like a finite amount of success. They think that there's only a certain amount of success in the world. If people actually thought, there's enough success to go around for everyone.
Yeah.
Whereas people think like, oh, well, if he's successful, I can't be successful, there's not enough. So that's a scarcity mindset. If people put themselves into an abundance mindset of, there's
and there's so many different things to be successful about.
Correct.
You can succeed in so many different avenues, and so many different things.
Financially,
but one thing I can tell you from writing my book, whether you want to consider that a success, a lot of people tell me that's a personal success.
That looks like coke on the table.
Yeah, a lot of people tell me that's a personal success. It was just really sticking it out, writing it.
Yep.
being sure about it. I mean, it was hard. It was a very big battle of the mind. But all I can say is, you know, it's what you said, don't give up, work hard and have something unique. And that's what I did. I came up with something like that. And, you know, there's still a lot more work that can be done. So it's never the end. Any last words?
Look, I think this is, I'll finish off on this, is that life's all about perception. And this is the best way I can explain it. I'll give you a quick example of what perception is for those that don't know the true understanding of perception. Then I'll give you what you can do about your life. So perception is, let's say you've got a farmer and you've got a boy that wants to play football on a Saturday, right? So two very completely different demographics. It gets to Saturday morning. The farmer's been through a drought for the last 6 months. Right, so he needs it to rain. The kid doesn't want it to rain because he's got to play football. Exactly right. It rains on the Saturday. The farmer is overjoyed and, you know, so happy and so grateful that it's broken the drought and he has rain. The child is completely distraught because of the fact that he doesn't get to play football. So the same thing has happened to two different people, and all that changed their emotional attachment to it. Well, one, it was their emotional attachment, which we'll talk about at a later date, but two was how they perceived it. Now, when you start looking at life as bad things happen for me, you know, if let's say a family member passes away or you lose your, I know, you know, that's a bit extreme, but let's say you lose your job. Instead of looking at why me, why have I lost my job, I've done something wrong, instead of, you know what, this happened for me,
so I could do go to other pages.
This is going to lead me to the next opportunity, right? That right there will change your life if you just.
That's how I see it as, and that's how we should all see it as. When one door closes, another one opens, and then you don't know how many more there can be. Well, I want to say thanks. We've had a long podcast, but it's been a good one. This is going to be broken up into multiple pieces, but yeah, once again, Zach Adraneia, System 333, and Ben the Mobbzy. We're here bringing it.
Prodigy.
Yeah, that's it. The Prodigy. What do they call it? The Prodigy Ben Mobbz.
Oh, the Prodigy is just the Instagram handle. It just means I'm a student.
Well, there you go. He's living it up here in Brisbane, and we'll put a close to this. I hope you have a great day, a great evening, or wherever you are in the world. Enjoy.